Hey, hello and welcome to today's system design session. So today we are going to see design newsfeed. So it can be any FB newsfeed, right? Or it can be Instagram newsfeed, or it can be Twitter as well, right? Nowadays it is called X. Okay. So so whenever an interviewer asks us, right, to design something, right? So we should be knowing what we are designing here, right? So the first question is, or we can confirm this from the interviewer, what is newsfeed, right? So newsfeed is nothing but the constantly updating stories of or the posts or the content made by the people, pages or group which a user follows, right? So newsfeed is uh, the posts made by the people, pages or groups that a user follow. So the user will know, right, looking at the news feed, what are the updates made by what is going on in people's lives, right? So the various updates, the images, the videos which the people posts, right? So this is the news feed. So once we have got, right, what is that we want to design. So the next question would be to understand the requirements from the interviewer, right? Requirements requirements. So the first and foremost would be to understand functional requirements, right? What are the functional requirements, right? So the first and foremost functional requirement definitely would be to generate, right? To generate news feed of for a user to generate news feed for a user, which will contain uh, the post made by the people, pages or groups, right? That the user follows, right? To generate, right? This is one of the main functional requirement. Then second would be a user should be able to follow other users or pages or groups, right? So users should be able to follow other users, pages or groups. Third would be a new post, right? A new post made by user made by a user should be updated, right? Should be updated to his or her followers, right? Followers newsfeed. So a new post made by user, right, should be definitely uh, uh, be part of, right, or should be updated to his or her followers newsfeed, right? So his or her followers should be able to see the new post made by the user, right? Right. So these are the few functional requirements, right? So what would be the non-functional requirements, right? Non-functional requirements. So one would be so whenever user logs in, right, so the news feed should be generated with minimum latency, should be generated very fast, should be generated with minimum latency, right? Let's say 2 seconds is tolerable. Within 2 seconds, the news feed should be generated. Okay. These are the few requirements. The second can be a new post. A new post made by a user should be visible, should be visible in his or her followers newsfeed within 5 seconds. let's say 5 seconds is tolerable for us, right? So these are the few non-functional requirements, right? So we need to clarify these or take inputs from the interviewer, right? So right, we should be on the same page regarding the requirements, the functional and non-functional requirements, right? So once the functional non-functional requirements is clarified, right? So we need to do the scale estimation. We want to know what would be the scale for which you want to design the system, right? So this is another question for the interviewer, like what is the scale they are expecting. So let's say the daily active users, right, are 300 million, right? And each user uh, 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 requests newsfeed request 5 times a day, right? Each user requests his newsfeed 5 times a day. So how many requests will be there? So for example, 300 million, if there are 300 million active users, daily active users, and they load their newsfeed 5 times a day. So we'll have 1.5 billion requests per day, right? So what would be the traffic estimate? Traffic estimates for day will be this 1.5 billion requests per day, but per second it will be around 75,000 requests per second, right? This will be the traffic estimates. And what will be the let's say what will be the storage estimates, right? Storage estimates. Now let's say we want to generate newsfeed, right? The newsfeed should be visible to the users, right? Newsfeed within seconds with minimum latency, right? So in order to have newsfeed generation with minimum latency, we need to store the newsfeed data in the cache, right? So cache, as we know, it's very fast, right? The fetch time and right, the load time, it's very fast, right? So let's say we are caching uh, for caching 500 posts, right? 500 posts per user, right? From this 500 posts, these are the followers, right? These are the users which this user follows, right? Right? So 500 posts per user, right? If we are caching per user, and let's say each post is of 1 KB, 1 KB in size. So for per user, we'll be storing 500 KB of posts, right? 500 KB of posts, right? Per user, right? And this 500 posts, these are what? This is the news feed for this particular user, and this post contains all the followers posts or updates, right? Which the user follows. So for each user, will require to store 500 KB of data of posts in the cache. So if we consider 300 million, right? 300 million into 500 KB. So it will require around 150 TB of data to be cached, 150 TB. So let's say one machine, it stores 100 GB of data, right? So we'll require 1500 such machines, right? 1500 cache machines or Redis cluster, right? Cache, right? To store this 150 TB of data, right? So these are the few of the scale estimation, right? Traffic and storage estimates we have made, right? Now, once we are done with this, right? Once we are done with this scale estimation, now let's design the APIs, right? Let's design the APIs. For example, let's say will have two APIs, right? Post one would be V1 me feed, right? So what this post will do, if I want to generate a new post, right? So I'll be using this API. So what will be few parameters? One will be auth token to authenticate the user, right? To authenticate the user, and other would be the content, right? The content which I want to post, right? The content which I want to post. So these are the few parameters, params, right? The content which I want to post, right? Which I want to make the post for, right? One would be this post generation API, and second would be this newsfeed fetching API, right? Get me v1 me feed, right? So this is the news feed. Whenever right, whenever user logs in, right, so this API will be called to generate the news feed for the user, right? So what will be few params? One will be auth token, definitely, to authenticate the user. Second would be since ID, for example, since ID. And third would be the count of posts, the count of posts, right? So since ID, for example, let's say in each iteration, for the first time, in each loop, we fetch 20 posts for the user, right? 20 posts, right? So whenever user logs in, so, right, the first time the since ID would be 1. The since ID would be 1 and the count of posts would be 20. So our API will be returning 20 posts, right? So whenever the user reaches the end of the posts, right, which were written, let's say 20th, right? So another request will be made. The since ID this time will be 21 and the count again will be 20. So this time, right? So whenever again the user reaches the end, so since ID will increase 41 and again 20 posts will be written from 41, right? So these are the two APIs, right? The two general APIs which we'll have in our system. Okay. So once we know the APIs, right? Once we know the APIs, the next step would be to design DB. To design DB, right? So what all actors we want to design the DB for, right? So one would be the user, right? Users, right? One would be the users. Definitely the user are using the newsfeed, right? Second would be entities. Entities. It can be pages or groups, right? Third would be uh, feed items, right? The news, the posts, right? The posts, right? So that is feed item. And fourth, we can say media, right? Media. It contains the images, right? In the post, images, videos in the post, videos in the post, right? So these are the few actors for which you want to design the DB, right? So let's say the first table, right? Let's say if you are using relational DB, let's say the first table which we can have is user. User is a table, then user ID is a primary key, right? And right, so user ID would be the primary key, and what would be the few columns? Name would be one of the column, right? Name would be one of the column, right? Then email ID would be another column, text, right? And then creation date, when was this user created, right? One would be date of birth, right, of the user. Then another column can be last login. When was the user last logged in, right? Last login. So these are the few of the data of the user which will be storing in this table, right? There can be another table called entity, right? Entity, which signifies pages and groups, right, that the user follows. So we can have entity ID as a primary key, right? And then we can have the name of the entity, right? The page, the name of the page, and the right, or the group, name of the group, right? We can have description column as well, describing this page or group, right? Definitely we'll have creation date as well. When was this page or group created? We'll have type as well. Type indicating tiny int, right? Whether it is page or group, 0 or 1 can be the values, right? So these are the few columns we can consider an entity. And let's say if we are using relational DB, then what we can do is the user following the mapping table, right, of the user following other users or following other entities, right? The user may follow some page or group or follow some other users, right? So what would be the let's say the name of the table would be user follow, right? User follow. And what would be the primary key? User ID It will be a combination of two columns, user ID and user or entity ID, right? A user may follow user, other user or entity, right? So this will be a composite key, right? And another column can be type, right? Tiny int, right? So it will signify whether it is user or page or group, right? Right? User or page or group, right? So user follow we have, which provides which stores a mapping of one user following other user, right? Right. So once this will be the metadata definitely, and now let's come to the newsfeed data, right? The feed item. So let's say we have this table called feed item, right? So what would be the primary key? Will have feed item ID, right? As a PK primary key, right? And which user or entity it had created, right? This feed item. User or entity ID will have one column definitely, right? Which user or entity had created this feed item, right? The content, the content, the content, right? The text, right? The text, if you have any quotes or something like that, and then the latitude, longitude, right? The location, longitude. Then what else we can have? Creation date. When was this created? Right? Creation date. When was it created? What else we can have? The number of likes, right? Number of likes, likes we can have one of the column, right? And a feed item may also have media, right? Images or right images or videos, right? Media. We can have another table for that, right? And we can have media ID, right? Which will be the PK, and then we will have path of the media, right? So where will we be storing the images or videos? We'll be storing in some blob storage, right? In some blob storage, definitely not in the DB, but we'll be storing those images or the videos in the blob storage. Some in some maybe we can consider some S3 file system, right? Right, wherein we'll be storing this the images, right? So we'll store the path of the images or the videos stored in the S3 bucket, right? So we'll store the path of the media, image or video, right? Then latitude, longitude, definitely we'll have latitude, longitude, the place, right? The location of where the this photos or videos were, right? And then what else? Latitude, longitude, and then creation date as well. Creation date as well, right? So this will be the few columns, and then we can have the mapping table between feed item and media, right? So feed item may contain definitely can contain images and videos as well. So feed item media we can have, right? Right. And what would be the feed item? What would be the primary key? So the primary key will be feed item ID, right? Composite key again, and media ID, right? So this is a mapping table, PK, composite key, right? So yes, so this will be the database. This will be the data which will be storing in our databases, right? So we have designed database as well. Now what now? So let's see the system design now. So the system design uh, 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 can be divided into two types. One would be news feed generation. Okay. So let's say we have to generate, the system has to generate the news feed for Adam, right? So when the Adam logs in, right? So first step, what we'll do, we will fetch all the user IDs or page or group IDs that Adam follows. Let's say we have to generate a news feed for Adam, right? Once this is done, we will fetch the posts made by these IDs, the user, the user page group IDs made by the user that Adam follows, right? So first step is to fetch all the user IDs, user page group IDs that Adam follows. Once done, for those IDs, we'll fetch the posts, right? Made by uh, yeah, post made by these IDs, right? That the Adam follows, that Adam follows. Okay. So once done, what we need to do? Once done, we need to rank these posts, right? Rank these posts according to the relevance, right? Adam's relevance, right? So how can we rank these, right? So one can be the timestamp, the latest timestamp, right? We'll first order in that way, the latest timestamp. Second can be the post can be like popularity of the post, right? Number of likes, comments. Third can be images, videos, right? If there are images, videos, so these also can be factor, right? To rank the posts, right? So these are some of the factors. So on a high level, these will be the steps, right? And then uh, once we have ranked the post, what we'll do? We'll first serve 20 top 20 posts, right? Serve top 20 posts to the user, right? Once the 20 top 20 posts are once the user once Adam has served served, right? All these 20 posts, then the next 20 can be served. Okay. So on a high level, these are the 4 steps for newsfeed generation, right? Now, how to generate newsfeed, right? How to generate newsfeed? For example, let's say if we are fetching the posts, right, from the database, and let's say if this is a query, right? The database query. So what is the query says? We have already seen the schema, right? The tables, right? Select feed item ID from feed item where user ID. So we have seen that user ID is there in user ID column is there in feed item, right? Where user ID in. Okay, this is a sub query. Select entity ID from user follow, right? Where user ID equal to current user. So current user ID will be Adam's user ID, right? And and what we'll do, we'll fetch all those users. We'll fetch all those users from user follow table. We have seen that user follow contains a mapping, right? Contains a mapping, right? Of user ID and entity or friend ID, right? This was the composite key, right? Composite primary key, right? The combination of these two columns. So what we'll do, we will we'll fetch all these entity of friend ID, and then from feed item we'll fetch those feed item IDs of these user or friend IDs, right? Of these user or entity IDs, right? And union, the second query would be again the same, only slight difference, slight modification. Entity ID in entity. First, we were fetching user ID. Now we are fetching entity ID in entity or friend ID from user follow again, where again it will be current user, that is Adam's user, it will be, right? So we are doing the union of these two. One is user and entity, that is page of group, it can be, right? And then order by creation date. This is a simple formula, like latest timestamp in descending, creation date in descending. So we are ordering with the latest timestamp, all those, and limit 100. You are fetching the top 100 posts, okay, for Adam, for user Adam, right? But if you see, if we if we hit this query, right, every time the user logs in, or if there's a new feed item, right, made by one of the friends of Adam, right? So this will be very slow, right? This will be very slow. And for example, if some user is popular, right, who has millions of followers, then definitely it's going to, the performance is going to hit, right? So uh, rather than hitting database all the time, so the solution can be, we can fetch from the system, can fetch from cache, right? All the news feed, the news feed for a particular user can be fetched from cache. Okay, but our system will have to store into cache first, right? Our system will have to store into cache first, right? Right, into cache first, then we'll be able to fetch from cache, right? So let's see first the high level flow diagram. Okay, let's see the high level flow diagram. Uh, for example, there's a user, right? There's a user, Jane. There's a user Jane who had created a new post, right? And there's user B and user C, right? These users follow user C and user B. These users follow Jane, right? So let's see if Jane uh, creates a new post, how the post is reflected to user B and user C. Okay, so let's see through a flow diagram. So let's say Jane made, right? Or let's see, we can do this. Yeah, let's take a user. This is Jane, right? Create post, right? Now, first of all, our entry point to the system will be API gateway, right? Wherein all the authentication and rate limiting and all those stuff will be done through this gateway. This API gateway will be exposed to the outside world, right? So API gateway, our request will come through, authentication will be done here, API gateway, and then once authentication is done, we'll have our application servers, right? Application server. Once it is okay, application server will have a new another service called Newsfeed generation service. This will be a dedicated service for generating newsfeed, right? So what it is going to do? It is going to will have cache for metadata, right? Cache for metadata cache, wherein the user information, right? User IDs, user follow, all will be present in this user metadata cache. Then second will be post cache, right? Whatever the user makes the post, right? Those also will be saved in this cache, right? This is post cache. And definitely, if this cache miss, then we'll have, or permanent storage also will have metadata cache, metadata DB, right? Another DB will be post DB, right? Then we'll have media cache, wherein all are the images and videos will be stored in this media cache, right? And we'll have storage, right? We'll have storage, blob storage like S3 or something, S3 bucket or something, wherein images and video storage will have, right? So this newsfeed generation service will fetch all the relevant data from metadata cache, right? For example, if it wants to generate the if it wants to generate the newsfeed for Jane user, right? For Jane user, so it will fetch all the users which are followed by Jane, right? Which are followed by Jane, and then those for those user IDs, the newsfeed generation service will fetch all the posts from for those user IDs from post cache, right? And from media cache, the images and videos which are part of the posts, right, will be fetched from media cache, right? So Once done, newsfeed generation service will also store the newsfeed for the users in this newsfeed cache. Newsfeed cache, right? And we'll have notification service as well. Notification service, right? Newsfeed, for example, notification service, right? Wherein this service can notify the users, right? If there is any new post which is made by one of the users, which the user followed, right? So newsfeed generation service, a newsfeed notification service will notify them, right? So let's say now there is user B, this is user B, right? And this is user C, right? So what again they will API gateway again will come into picture, and then we'll have application server, right? Application server, right? And then this will right, fetch the newsfeed from newsfeed cache, right? Right, newsfeed cache, and then yes, if there is anything to notify, this can be done, right? This can be done through this newsfeed notification service, right, which will notify these users, right? So if there was a new post which was generated by Jane, so it follows all this step, right? The newsfeed generation service um, will store in this newsfeed cache, right? And the notification service will notify to users B and user C that okay, there's a new post which is made. You can pull the new post. Again, it depends. We'll see whether right, the notification service will notify to user B or C, or user B or C will have to manually pull for the new updates, right? We'll see that how it is decided, right? So on a high level, this is the uh, diagram, right? This is a diagram. But let's say, as we said, right? So as we said, rather than again, so when a user logs in, right, and all this step is followed when the user logs in, and then the newsfeed generation fetches all this, right, all the data for that user, the user IDs, fetching the user IDs, right, from this metadata cache, and then again fetching posts and media from, and then storing in the newsfeed cache. It is going to take a lot of time. So rather than what a system can do, it can continuously in the background, it can continuously, this newsfeed generation service, right, this newsfeed generation service can continuously generate uh, the news feed and store in the newsfeed cache rather than waiting for the user to log in, right? So it will be very fast, right? And even if there are new posts, so this newsfeed generation service can store this new post as well in this newsfeed cache. So in the background, this will keep on running rather than user logging in and then this newsfeed generation service generating the newsfeed. So this will keep on uh, working in the background, right? At regular intervals, maybe, right? At regular intervals, it will keep on updating the newsfeed in the newsfeed cache. So it will have all the latest updates. This newsfeed cache will have all the latest updates. Okay, and this cache, this newsfeed cache can be anything like Redis cache, right? It can be Redis cache. It's a distributed caching service, right? Okay, and what can be the format of storing the data of this newsfeed, right? It can be user ID and the mapping of user ID and, for example, hash map, right? Hash map or linked hash map. It can be hash map, right, of feed item ID and feed item object, right? This can be, so user ID, mapping of user ID will be the key, right? And value will be again one of the struct. right? Not struct, right? Struct of what? Linked hash map and date, last feed generation date. It can be struct, right? Again, it can be struct this object, right? Which will contain linked hash map and this last feed generation date. So what is this last feed generation date? So what will happen is when we have to generate, right? When this newsfeed generation service has to generate for this user ID, the newsfeed for this user ID. So it will see what was the last time, what was the last time when was when this newsfeed was generated for this user. So post that post this time, the newsfeed generation service will look for the new posts post this time, right? And it will append in this linked hash map, right? This is feed item ID, and this will like the timestamp, it will be this will be storing in the latest timestamp. The latest timestamp will make the post with the latest timestamp will make to the top, right? So feed item ID, and then this feed item, this feed item will contain the actual post data, right? So this will be the format which will be stored. This will be the data format which will be stored in Redis cache, right? User ID will be the key and value will be the struct containing hash map and this last feed generation time. Okay, so this was a news feed generation. Now quickly see the second part of system design. Second part would be news feed publishing. So what is newsfeed publishing? So one can be uh, right whenever there is a new post which was generated by a user, right? Which was generated by a user, uh, right? So what we can do is we can publish publish that post to the news feed of the users of the users which follow which follow the user Jane, for example, right? So Jane had made a new post, right? Now, what we want to do, we want to publish this post, right, to the users which follow Jane, to the users which follow Jane, right, to the users which follow Jane, right? So what we'll do, the first option can be our system will notify or will publish the post, right? Will notify or will publish this new post made by Jane, right, to the news feed of the users which follow Jane, right? This can be one option. but but let's say Jane is very popular, and she has millions of followers, right? So it is going to be a very costly operation to publish that particular post to the millions of users, right? To the millions of users, it is going to be very costly and very slow as well, right? So in this, so second option can be, right? Second option can be the users themselves can pull can pull the news feed for any latest updates. So in the second option is that users themselves will pull, uh, right? So that if there are any new posts from the users which they follow, okay, they will those new posts will make to their news feed, right? But what is the disadvantage of this approach, or this step, or this option would be that many a times it can be an empty, right? They're going to pull, but they'll get empty responses, because it may happen, right? It may happen that there are no new updates or no new posts from the users they follow. So it is going to turn out into empty responses, which is again, uh, it can take performance it, right? It's not good, right? So the third can be hybrid. hybrid approach, right? So what will be the hybrid approach? For example, for the users which don't have a lot of followers, right? Which don't have a lot of followers, the system can publish. Our system can publish the new posts to the users who follow the user who made the post, right? And this user has limited followers, right? In this case, our system can notify, right, to the users, because there are not a lot of followers for this user. There are not a lot of followers, so this is tolerable, or this is good, right? The system can notify to the users who follow, right? Second will be, right, for example, if there is a celebrity and who has millions of followers, then in that case our system will let the followers pull pull for the latest updates right? As it is going to be very costly for the system to post to notify or to publish the new post to millions of followers, right? So will the system will let, in this case, if the celebrity posts anything, right? If the celebrity posts anything, system won't publish that post to the followers, because the followers can be millions, right? In millions. So system won't publish or won't notify. It will let the followers, the millions of followers, to pull for the latest updates, right? So yes, so this is the newsfeed publishing, which we have seen, right? Which we have seen the newsfeed publishing, right? So these were the two parts of system design. One was newsfeed generation, and another was newsfeed publishing, right? And again, in the redis the last I'll say, uh, in the redis server, right? How we can, if there is redis cluster, right? So we can partition, or we can store the data, as we have already discussed, right? Based on user id, right? This based on user id, right? uh, the data will be partitioned, right? So this user id, uh, the post, right, the newsfeed for a particular user will be stored in one node only, rather than distributing across multiple nodes. All the newsfeed item will be stored on one particular redis node only, which will be faster in fetching of the newsfeed for this user id, right? So for a particular user, all its newsfeed data, all his or her newsfeed data will be part of one redis node only. Any, it can be any, whether this or this or this or this, right? So that the fetching and storing will also be faster. So yes, so this is the system design, the complete system design, right? Newsfeed system design. Okay. So thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.